Welcome to World in a String Designs. I'm Alicia. Today I'm going to talk about chickens, and this video is going to talk about whether or not your own backyard flock for fresh eggs is the right fit for you. So with egg prices being as high as they have been lately, I don't know about you guys, but in my area they're about 4 times what they cost in say 2019, 2020. We have them, I think, in the stores at about $8 a dozen, and I remember when they were $1.50 to $2 a dozen, and that wasn't that long ago, a couple years. With the prices being so high, a lot of people are wondering if backyard chickens might be the right move for them. And the answer is maybe. So I'm going to talk about some of the pros and some of the cons of having backyard chickens, and some of the things that affect egg prices. And I think a lot of people think that chickens are cheap and you get free eggs. They're the most expensive free eggs I've ever encountered, okay? So I want to make sure that I set a reasonable expectation for what you might expect if you decide to get backyard chickens. So let's talk about high egg prices. Now, there is a couple reasons for this, and we're not getting into politics at all. So the bird flu has been one of the biggest drivers for high egg prices. And one of the things that's happening is, particularly in recent years, big ag, right, big agriculture, sort of controls a lot of our food supply. And one of the ways that they can provide eggs so inexpensively is what we call economies of scale. So they have these very, very large facilities, and it helps them to consolidate their cost. So they're paying to heat as few buildings as possible. The chickens don't have a lot of space. They have feed systems so that's automated, and it helps cut down on their labor. And so there's a lot of different things at play here, right? But the fact that they do it big is why they can do it cheap. So if you have chickens in your backyard, you're really generally not going to be able to do it as cheaply as some of these extremely large facilities. Your birds are going to have more room. Granted, you're not probably paying yourself for your time, but your time is still valuable, in my opinion. I think my time is valuable when I'm out shoveling snow for chickens. Producing all of these eggs in a few extremely large facilities also consolidates the risk associated with raising all the birds in one place. So when something like the bird flu hits, these are very, very contagious diseases, and they can wreak havoc on the food system. And there's a large amount of concern that the birds will spread the disease to humans and or to other animals, and then who then may pass it along to humans. So there's a lot that we're kind of concerned about when we see something like that. And when you have these enormous facilities, when bird flu hits one of them, they call all the birds. Every single bird is killed, and that's to control the disease and to prevent bigger issues. And what happens is when we have these really large facilities and we're killing all these birds, when a chick hatches, on average, it takes that bird about 6 months before it lays a single egg. Now, those birds have to be raised up, right? So this isn't something that we kill all these birds and then we just get new birds. It doesn't really work that way. It takes time to build back up. And with all these large facilities, we're consolidating our risk in one place. When they are hit with bird flu and all those birds need to be culled, they are big enough that it impacts the food supply. And then supply and demand, there's not as many chickens producing as many eggs, so the prices go up because the demand is the same and the supply is lower. What you get when you have backyard chickens is you moderate your cost. So you're probably never going to do it as cheap as the big guys do when things are going well, right? So I calculate, and I feed my birds really nice food and I give them lots of space. I figure it costs $4 a dozen for the eggs that my chickens produce. Now, that being said, I'm not trying to have cheap eggs. I want my chickens to have a very charmed life on my farm. So they have plenty of space. My hens, my laying hens, go on a retirement plan. So when they're done laying eggs or their egg laying is significantly reduced, I still see value in that hen on my farm. The older hens act as sort of mentors to younger hens. They help manage the flock and keep, if you've ever heard of the pecking order, they keep the younger hens in line. They can help, sometimes the older hens will go broody and help raise chicks. They are great for bug control. They're producing fertilizer. So I see a lot of value in those hens on my farm because of the way I want to run my farm. I see value in them and I like to keep them around, but it makes the cost per egg higher, right? So I'm in a position where I'm fortunate enough that I can make that call that it's worth it to me to continue feeding and housing this chicken that might not still be laying eggs. Not everybody might have that luxury. So someone else might be in a position that they're like, if this chicken isn't pulling its own weight, we really can't afford to keep it on the farm. And that's a personal decision and that's up to you. But that's something to keep in mind. So what might be $4 a dozen for me might be $2 a dozen for you, right? It really varies quite a bit, but it's largely within your control to a large extent. Some folks might try to get restaurant waste to feed their chicken scraps, and that's a great idea. And other people might just be like, no, I want the bags of feed. I want it dry. I don't want to have to worry about anything like that. We also don't give our chickens light in the winter. So if you give them light in the coop at nighttime, then when the days are short, then it will help them to lay more eggs. We don't do that. We let our chickens be chickens, and we figure they probably need their energy to stay warm. And it's okay for them to have a break. We're not really worried about the number of eggs that we're getting every day. So there's that. When the prices go high, your feed costs aren't going to change that much. So during COVID, our feed costs went up a little bit, but it wasn't nearly as dramatic as the egg prices that you saw in the grocery store. And feed prices are a lot more stable than egg prices, I guess, is the summary. But again, if you're looking for cheap, backyard chickens aren't necessarily going to be your answer. If you're willing to put a lot of time and effort into it and you want to grow your own feed for your chickens and you want to give them table scraps and maybe you want to go to the grocery store or restaurants and get table scraping, those are ways that you might be able to feed your chickens and still be really careful about making sure they get enough protein and all that. So make sure that they're getting good balance of nutrients. However, that's going to take time and it's going to take effort, especially if you're growing enough food for a year for a flock of chickens. That's a lot of work. So there's that. So you're probably not doing it very cheap. And if you are doing it very cheap, you're putting a lot of your time into it, which makes it overall really not very cheap. So let's talk about some of the pros and some of the cons of owning chickens. So let's start with the cons. So cleaning the coop. It's not really fun. If you have a small flock, it's pretty easy. And you can compost their waste into fertilizer. And so if you have a compost pile, you can put it right in there. But mucking out the chicken coop is never really what I would chalk up in the fun column. So there's that. When there's bad weather, you still need to care for your chickens. So when it's 10 below in Maine and driving wind and spitting snow, you're going out and you're taking care of your chickens. You're changing out their water because it freezes all the time. Or you might have a heated waterer. That's another option. You're shoveling or removing snow so that they have space and they're not just in the coop all the time. If you're giving them scraps, you're probably changing them out because if they don't eat them fast enough, they are also going to freeze. So there is a lot of work that goes into it. I don't live in a temperate climate, but if I did, I would imagine probably, high winds, or if you get bad weather, hurricane, I don't even know. I think I saw some videos where people brought their chickens in the house because they were worried about the coop taking damage. I don't really know much about that. If you do, leave a comment down below if you have extreme weather in your area that's different than mine, and what your challenges were and how you dealt with them. We'd all like to learn from that. Another con to having backyard chickens is you will lose some. And especially if you have a small flock, a lot of us will tend to get attached to them. And predators are a thing, so you want to make sure you have a really good, secure coop. But injury and illness is also something that you're likely to have to deal with. And I've been there. I've been outside, ugly crying while I dispatched my favorite hen because I knew she was going to suffer if I did not. And that's a terrible feeling. It's a terrible place to be, but it's the right thing to do. Now, if you don't have the stomach for that, that doesn't mean you can't have chickens. You just want to have a plan, right? That maybe your spouse could lend a hand in that regard, or your sibling, or if you have a chickeny friend who has a farm and maybe is a little more used to that, that might be able to come help you out if you have a situation that warrants it. Also in the cons list is the startup costs of chickens. So you are going to need a safe place for them. You're going to need a good sturdy coop. You might want some fencing. Some people free range and some people don't, but the reality is, and this goes along with having a good sturdy, secure coop, a lot of people like to eat chicken because they're delicious. And a lot of animals like to eat them too. Everything wants to eat your chickens. Your neighborhood dog, raccoons, fisher cats, foxes, hawks, eagles, they all like chicken. Like everything that ermine. Oh my gosh, you guys, ermine. Ermine is my spirit animal. So these little guys, they're freaking adorable, but they are mean. They have huge attitudes in a teeny tiny little package. And they have attitude for days. And they will get in your coop, and they don't actually take the chicken. What they do is they kill it and they drink its blood, and then they leave the carcass behind. But they will take out your whole flock in one night and stack them up like cordwood, and I am not joking. Anything in the weasel family has the potential to do that, and they are also relatively small animals, so they can get in small spaces. You want to make sure you have a good secure coop. I do a 1/4 inch hardware cloth. A 1/2 inch might be a little too big, and you could have something like a weasel get in a spot like that. Even though it's tiny, you think it's small. It's not small enough. So now let's get into some of the pros of having chickens, because I have a lot of chickens and I think there's a lot of advantages to it. So they reduce the waste in your household because they will eat your kitchen scraps. And you don't have to give them scraps if you don't want to, but it does reduce our feed bill. I like doing it, and the chickens get so happy. So that's fun as well. And also, they are really great for bug control. So they're going to reduce the fleas and the ticks in your yard. I harvest like Japanese beetles and squash bugs from our garden. You've probably heard a lot of people take like a pitcher of soapy water and then they put the bugs into it and they can't get out. I just don't put the soap in the water. So I find in the 20 minutes to half an hour I'm out there, the bugs aren't going to find their way out. Maybe one or two will, but I've still got like, probably hundreds in this container. But I just pick them off, put them in the bucket, and then I actually put the water right in the chicken's water and they bob for bugs. And sometimes I just put the pitcher down and they bob for bugs. But if you've never seen chickens bob for bugs, is great. You should try it. So bug control is a huge advantage that chickens offer. Also, they poop, which was in the disadvantage column, but it's good fertilizer, so it's also kind of an advantage. So if you give them their scraps, your scraps, and then you put them in a compost pile, just throw them on the compost pile, they'll get in there. They will eat the scraps that they want. They will dig around, and they will aerate and turn your compost for you. So if you are a gardener, there's a lot of advantages to having chickens, and they really can segue really nicely into your farm. Or, it doesn't even have to be like a food farm. It could be if you have a flower bed. That fertilizer is still very valuable. They are really fun to watch, especially if you let them have chicks. So every now and then a hen will go broody and she'll want babies and she'll want to sit on her eggs. And if you don't want her to, it's fine. You take the eggs away from her and you shoo her off the nest. And she might, sometimes they get a little persistent and it takes a couple weeks to break them of that desire. But if you let them hatch out, so if you want chicks and you let them hatch out their own chicks, it is the sweetest thing watching a couple little chicks running around after a mama hen, and she's teaching them how to chicken and eat bugs and scratch, and it's the most adorable thing ever, just trust me. But I find it very grounding to just see chickens in the yard and pecking around. It's very grounding. It's peaceful. I just like watching it. I could sit here and watch them for hours. But there's nothing better when I have a day that I'm working from home. I like to set up my laptop by the window, and then I have like the best view ever. It's just my chickens living their best chicken lives in the yard. It's wonderful. Perhaps the best reason for having backyard chickens is the eggs taste so much better. You gotta trust me. If you don't believe me, find somebody, a roadside stand, find a neighbor or something, buy some eggs off of them. They're amazing. The yolks are firmer. They tend to be darker and richer in color. They tend to actually have more nutrition. I'll see if I can find the document and put a link below to that. That cites the study. But yeah, they tested a lot of like backyard chicken eggs versus industry eggs, and it makes more sense. They're eating more bugs. They have a higher omega-3 ratio in the fats that they contain. They have more vitamin D because the chickens have been out in the sunlight, whereas industry chickens, probably most of them never see the light of day. And the best reason that I think, in my opinion, my humble opinion, the best reason for having chickens is you have a measure of control over their life, and you can give them a charmed existence on their farm where you know that the egg you ate or the chicken you ate, if you're raising meat birds, you know that animal has had sunshine, the opportunity for green grass and bugs, and to engage in their natural behaviors. So chickens like to roost. They're not always given that opportunity in industry. I think there are some instances where they are, depending on the type of facility, and there's cage-free and there's caged. But even the cage-free, it's not as great as it sounds. I'm not here to make claims about the industry, but I do know when in the cage-free environment, the chickens, when they're close together, they get stressed and they peck each other. And the industry's solution to that is to cut off the tips of their beaks. It is not let's just leave it at this. Industry chickens do not lead the charmed life that they will on your farm. It's very satisfying for me to see my birds living their best chicken life in the yard. It makes it totally worth it for me. So, given all this, you might decide that backyard chickens are the right choice for you, or you might not. And I will say, make sure that you are checking with your local town or city to make sure that chickens are allowed. So some places don't allow backyard chickens. Some places allow them, but only hens. Some places have a limit on the number of chickens that you can have. So make sure that you're doing everything by the book. It's much easier that way. And if you can't have chickens, or you decide they're not right for you, I would highly encourage you to support either a small local farm or an egg stand, like a neighbor whose chickens lay eggs. Everybody who doesn't buy their eggs from industry makes the supply a little more stable. So every small farm we have makes the food supply for eggs a little more stable. And it would have to be a really big difference from what we're doing now to impact the egg prices. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't still do it, right? If you are getting your eggs from someone local, that moderates your pricing, even if it doesn't for everybody else. So I think that's still a worthwhile endeavor. So those are my thoughts on chickens. I really enjoy having them. I don't ever want to not have chickens again because I like having them so much. But it is a personal decision, so weigh it carefully. If you think it's right for you, yay, way to go. And you'll really enjoy the eggs. And like I said, even if you think it's not right for you or you don't want to have your own chickens, if you eat eggs, I highly encourage you to find a small farm, local farm who provides them, or just a neighbor who has a small flock that can help keep you in eggs. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.